Question 1. System analysis indicates a planned upgrade to the Cisco ACI Fabrics firmware is scheduled, which is expected to introduce new features and security enhancements to ensure minimal disruption to critical business applications and maintain service continuity. Which impact assessment approach is most appropriate for this scenario? Option A. Rely on the vendor's release notes and internal team experience with previous firmware upgrades to estimate the potential impact, assuming minimal disruption based on past successful upgrades. Option B. Focus the impact assessment solely on the technical changes within the ACI configuration, verifying that all new features are correctly implemented and that existing policies remain functional from an ACI perspective. Option C. Initiate the upgrade during a scheduled maintenance window and monitor system logs for any immediate errors, with the understanding that any issues can be addressed reactively after the upgrade is complete. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive dependency mapping exercise involving application owners and infrastructure teams to identify all critical application flows and their reliance on specific ACI fabric components and policies. Subsequently, develop detailed rollback plans and conduct simulated failure scenarios in a lab environment that mirrors the production ACI configuration. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive dependency mapping exercise involving application owners and infrastructure teams to identify all critical application flows and their reliance on specific ACI fabric components and policies. Subsequently, develop detailed rollback plans and conduct simulated failure scenarios in a lab environment that mirrors the production ACI configuration. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge in managing the impact of a significant network infrastructure change within a Cisco ACI environment. The challenge lies in balancing the need for rapid deployment of new services with the imperative to minimize disruption to existing critical applications and ensure compliance with operational standards. Careful judgment is required to select an impact assessment approach that is both thorough and efficient, preventing unforeseen outages and maintaining service integrity. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a structured, data-driven assessment of potential consequences before implementation. This aligns with the principles of robust IT governance and risk management, which are implicitly expected in any regulated or enterprise IT environment. By engaging stakeholders, analyzing dependencies, and simulating potential failures, this method proactively identifies and mitigates risks, thereby safeguarding business operations and preventing costly downtime. This proactive stance is crucial for maintaining the availability and performance of applications hosted on the ACI fabric, a core tenet of building a reliable cloud infrastructure. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the technical configuration of ACI without considering the broader application and business context fails to address the full scope of potential impacts. This can lead to overlooking critical dependencies on external systems or user experience degradation, resulting in service disruptions that are not directly attributable to ACI configuration errors, but rather to a lack of holistic impact assessment. Such an oversight could be considered a failure in due diligence and risk management, potentially violating internal operational policies or service-level agreements. Another incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or past experience without a formal documented assessment is inherently risky. While experience is valuable, it cannot replace a systematic analysis of a specific change's unique implications. This can lead to a false sense of security and the omission of critical test cases or mitigation strategies, increasing the likelihood of unexpected failures. From a professional standpoint, this approach lacks the rigor expected for significant infrastructure changes and could be seen as negligent if it leads to adverse outcomes. The professional reasoning process for such situations should involve a phased approach. 1. Define the scope and objectives of the change. 2. Identify all affected systems, applications, and users. 3. Analyze dependencies between components. 4. Assess potential risks and their likelihood and impact. 5. Develop mitigation and contingency plans. 6. Communicate findings and plans to stakeholders. 7. Execute the change with monitoring and validation. 8. Conduct a post-implementation review. This structured decision-making process ensures that all critical aspects are considered, leading to informed choices and successful outcomes. Question 2. System analysis indicates that a financial services organization is planning to implement Cisco application-centric infrastructure, aside to enhance its data center network agility and security. The organization operates under strict regulatory frameworks governing data privacy, transaction integrity, and operational resilience. Which of the following approaches best ensures that the ACI implementation aligns with these regulatory requirements and minimizes operational risks? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment that meticulously analyzes ACI's technical capabilities against specific regulatory requirements, identifies potential compliance gaps, and outlines mitigation strategies for technical, operational, and security domains before deployment. Option B. Implement ACI with minimal configuration changes to existing security policies, relying on the assumption that the new infrastructure will not negatively affect current compliance postures. Option C. Prioritize the speed of deployment by focusing solely on the technical integration of ACI, deferring any detailed regulatory compliance checks to a post-implementation audit. Option D. Proceed with ACI deployment based on vendor best practices and assume that its advanced features will inherently satisfy all regulatory mandates. The correct answer is D. Proceed with ACI deployment based on vendor best practices and assume that its advanced features will inherently satisfy all regulatory mandates. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud adoption projects where the impact of a new technology on existing operational processes and security postures needs to be thoroughly understood before implementation. The professional challenge lies in balancing the potential benefits of ACI with the risks of disruption, non-compliance, and security vulnerabilities. A failure to conduct a comprehensive impact assessment can lead to significant unforeseen costs, operational downtime, and potential breaches of regulatory requirements, especially in environments with strict data handling and security mandates. The need for careful judgment arises from the complexity of ACI's integration with existing infrastructure and the diverse operational and security considerations involved. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic and thorough impact assessment that considers technical, operational, security, and compliance aspects. This aligns with best professional practices and regulatory expectations for IT system changes. A comprehensive assessment ensures that all potential consequences are identified, evaluated, and mitigated. This proactive approach minimizes risks, facilitates smoother integration, and ensures adherence to relevant regulations by identifying potential conflicts early. For example, in a regulated industry, understanding how ACI's policy enforcement mechanisms interact with existing data privacy regulations e.g. GDPR if the exam jurisdiction implies a European context, or HIPAA if US-centric, is paramount. This assessment would involve mapping ACI's capabilities against specific regulatory controls and identifying any gaps or necessary adjustments to policies and procedures. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing ACI without a proper impact assessment is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It demonstrates a disregard for due diligence and risk management. Specifically, it can lead to non-compliance with data protection laws. If ACI's network segmentation or policy enforcement inadvertently violates data residency or access control requirements mandated by regulations, it can result in severe penalties. Security vulnerabilities. Without assessing the impact on the existing security posture, new vulnerabilities could be introduced, leading to data breaches and a failure to meet security standards required by industry regulations or contractual obligations. Operational disruption. A lack of understanding of how ACI affects existing workflows can lead to unexpected downtime, impacting business continuity and potentially violating service-level agreements, SLAs, or regulatory uptime requirements. Financial mismanagement. Unforeseen integration costs, remediation efforts, and potential fines due to non-compliance represent a failure in responsible financial stewardship. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured decision-making process that prioritizes risk assessment and compliance. This involves 1. Defining the scope of the impact assessment, clearly outlining what aspects of the organization will be evaluated, e.g., network security, applications, operations, compliance. 2. Engaging relevant stakeholders from IT, security, legal, compliance, and business units to gather comprehensive input. 3. utilizing established frameworks for risk assessment and impact analysis, such as those provided by NIST or ISO, adapted to the specific context of ACI. 4. Documenting all findings, identified risks, and proposed mitigation strategies. 5. Obtaining formal approval for the implementation plan based on the assessment results, ensuring that all identified risks are addressed to an acceptable level. 6. Establishing a post-implementation review process to verify that the actual impact aligns with the assessment and to identify any further adjustments needed. Question 3. The efficiency study reveals that the current network segmentation strategy within the Cisco ACI fabric is contributing to higher operational overhead and slower application deployment times. To address this, a proposal has been put forth to streamline the segmentation by reducing the granularity of security policies and consolidating several isolated application tiers into a single, less restricted network segment. What is the most appropriate course of action to ensure compliance and maintain a secure posture while addressing the efficiency concerns? Option A. Rely solely on external firewall appliances to provide security for the consolidated application tiers, assuming ACI's internal segmentation is no longer necessary. Option B. Immediately implement the proposed consolidation of application tiers and reduce the granularity of security policies to achieve the desired operational efficiency. Option C. Disable all advanced security policies and segmentation features within ACI to create a completely flat network for maximum ease of management and deployment. Option D. Reevaluate the application deployment workflows to identify bottlenecks that are not directly related to segmentation granularity, and explore ACI's automation capabilities to enforce granular policies more efficiently. The correct answer is D. Reevaluate the application deployment workflows to identify bottlenecks that are not directly related to segmentation granularity, and explore ACI's automation capabilities to enforce granular policies more efficiently. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for operational efficiency with the long-term implications of data security and compliance within a Cisco ACI environment. The pressure to reduce costs and improve performance can lead to shortcuts that inadvertently violate regulatory frameworks governing data handling and network segmentation. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any proposed solution adheres to the principles of least privilege and data isolation, which are fundamental to maintaining security and meeting compliance mandates. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes the enforcement of granular security policies and network segmentation within the ACI fabric. This aligns with the principles of data protection and regulatory compliance, as it ensures that sensitive data remains isolated and accessible only to authorized entities. By leveraging ACI's policy-driven model, administrators can define and enforce these controls consistently across the infrastructure, thereby minimizing the attack surface and mitigating the risk of data breaches. This proactive security posture is essential for meeting the requirements of various regulatory frameworks that mandate data segregation and access control. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves disabling or reducing the scope of security policies to simplify network management and potentially improve throughput. This is a significant regulatory and ethical failure because it directly compromises data confidentiality and integrity. Many regulations, such as those pertaining to financial data or personal health information, explicitly require robust segmentation and access controls. Failing to implement these measures can lead to severe penalties, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust. Another incorrect approach is to implement a flat network architecture without proper segmentation, citing cost savings or ease of deployment. This is also a critical regulatory and ethical lapse. A flat network increases the blast radius of any security incident, allowing threats to propagate rapidly across the entire infrastructure. This violates the principle of defense in depth and fails to meet the requirements of regulations that mandate the isolation of sensitive data environments. A third incorrect approach might be to rely solely on external security appliances without integrating them into the ACI policy framework. While external security is important, neglecting to leverage ACI's native segmentation capabilities for internal traffic can create blind spots and inconsistencies in security posture. This can lead to non-compliance with regulations that require comprehensive security controls across the entire data path, not just at the perimeter. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach, prioritizing compliance and security as foundational elements of any operational efficiency initiative. This involves understanding the specific regulatory requirements applicable to the organization's data and operations. When evaluating solutions, the primary consideration should be their ability to maintain or enhance security and compliance. Decision-making should involve a thorough risk assessment, consulting with security and compliance teams, and ensuring that any changes are documented and auditable. The goal is to achieve efficiency without compromising the integrity and security of the data and the network. Question 4. Investigation of an unexpected network performance degradation within a Cisco ACI fabric traced to a recent, undocumented configuration change requires a methodical approach to identify the source and impact. Given the regulatory environment governing cloud infrastructure, which of the following actions best represents a compliant and professionally sound method for addressing this situation? Option A. Manually log into each leaf and spine switch to compare current configurations against historical records, looking for discrepancies. Option B. Assume the change was a minor, accidental oversight by a junior engineer and proceed with re-educating the team on configuration best practices without formal incident documentation. Option C. Immediately revert the entire fabric configuration to the last known stable backup without further analysis to restore performance. Option D. Utilize the Cisco APIC audit logging and change history features to precisely identify the unauthorized change, its author, and the timestamp, followed by a targeted remediation. The correct answer is C. Immediately revert the entire fabric configuration to the last known stable backup without further analysis to restore performance. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge in a regulated cloud environment where data integrity and compliance are paramount. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need for rapid troubleshooting and performance optimization with the strict requirements for data handling and auditability mandated by the exam's regulatory framework. Missteps can lead to data breaches, non-compliance penalties, and reputational damage. The pressure to restore service quickly can tempt engineers to bypass established protocols, making careful judgment and adherence to guidelines critical. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves leveraging the Cisco application Centric infrastructure, ACI Fabric's built-in auditing and logging capabilities to trace the unauthorized configuration change. This aligns with best professional practice by prioritizing a systematic, evidence-based investigation. Specifically, it adheres to the principles of accountability and transparency inherent in regulatory frameworks that govern IT infrastructure. By using the ACI's audit logs, the investigation can precisely identify who made the change, when it was made, and what specific parameters were altered. This detailed information is crucial for understanding the root cause, preventing recurrence, and providing irrefutable evidence for compliance audits. This method upholds the integrity of the system and demonstrates a commitment to secure and compliant operations. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately reverting the configuration to a known good state without thorough investigation. This is professionally unacceptable because it masks the root cause of the issue and fails to identify the unauthorized access or action. From a regulatory standpoint, this bypasses the requirement for incident investigation and reporting, potentially leaving vulnerabilities unaddressed and failing to meet audit trail requirements. It also prevents the organization from understanding the extent of the compromise or unauthorized activity. Another incorrect approach is to manually inspect individual switch configurations across the fabric without utilizing the centralized logging and auditing features. This is inefficient and prone to error, increasing the risk of overlooking critical details. Ethically and regulatorily, it demonstrates a lack of understanding of the ACI's capabilities for centralized management and auditing, which are designed to enhance security and compliance. Relying on manual methods in a complex, software-defined environment like ACI is a significant deviation from best practices for incident response and forensic analysis. A further incorrect approach is to assume the change was accidental and to simply re-educate the team without documenting the incident or performing a forensic analysis. This is professionally unsound, as it neglects the critical need for a formal incident response process. Regulatory frameworks often mandate documented incident handling procedures, including root cause analysis and remediation steps. Failing to document and investigate the unauthorized change leaves the organization vulnerable to repeat incidents and noncompliance with audit requirements. It also fails to establish accountability and learn from the event. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such a scenario should employ a structured incident response framework. This typically involves 1. Identification, recognizing that an unauthorized change has occurred. 2. Containment, preventing further damage or unauthorized access. 3. Eradication, removing the cause of the incident. 4. Recovery, restoring systems to normal operation. 5. Lessons learned, analyzing the incident to improve security and operational procedures. In the context of Cisco ACI, this means prioritizing the use of its integrated management and auditing tools to gather evidence, understand the impact, and implement appropriate corrective actions, all while ensuring that the process itself is documented and compliant with relevant regulations. Question 5. What factors determine the optimal integration of security and compliance policies within a Cisco ACI environment to meet diverse stakeholder requirements for agility and risk mitigation? Option A. The adherence to a predefined set of security best practices without considering the specific risk profile or business context of the organization. Option B. The alignment of security and compliance requirements with business objectives, the capabilities of Cisco ACI for policy automation and enforcement, and a collaborative stakeholder engagement process. Option C. The selection of the most advanced security features available in Cisco ACI, regardless of their impact on deployment speed or operational complexity. Option D. The prioritization of development team requests for rapid deployment and minimal security overhead to accelerate time to market. The correct answer is B. The alignment of security and compliance requirements with business objectives, the capabilities of Cisco ACI for policy automation and enforcement, and a collaborative stakeholder engagement process. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud adoption projects, balancing the desire for rapid innovation and agility with the need for robust security and compliance. The stakeholder perspective is critical because different groups have varying priorities and risk tolerances. The Chief Information Security Officer, CISO, will naturally focus on security controls, data privacy, and regulatory adherence, while the head of development will prioritize speed to market and ease of deployment. The head of operations will be concerned with stability, scalability, and cost efficiency. Navigating these competing interests requires a deep understanding of the business objectives, the technical capabilities of the Cisco ACI platform, and the relevant regulatory landscape. The correct approach emphasizes a collaborative and risk-based strategy. It involves engaging all key stakeholders early and often to define security and compliance requirements in the context of business goals. This approach leverages the capabilities of Cisco ACI, such as microsegmentation and policy-driven automation, to implement security controls that are both effective and efficient. By integrating security and compliance into the design and deployment phases, rather than treating them as afterthoughts, organizations can achieve agility without compromising on risk management. This aligns with the principles of secure development and operational excellence, which are implicitly supported by regulatory frameworks that mandate risk assessment and mitigation. Incorrect approaches fail to adequately address the multifaceted nature of cloud security and compliance. Focusing solely on technical features without considering stakeholder buy-in or business context leads to solutions that may be technically sound but operationally unviable or politically unacceptable. Prioritizing speed over security can expose the organization to significant regulatory penalties and reputational damage, especially in industries with stringent data protection laws. Conversely, an overly restrictive approach that stifles innovation can hinder business growth and competitiveness. Failing to involve all relevant stakeholders can result in missed requirements, increased rework, and resistance to adoption. The professional decision-making process should involve a structured risk assessment framework. This includes identifying potential threats and vulnerabilities, evaluating their impact, and determining appropriate mitigation strategies. It requires clear communication channels with all stakeholders, active listening to understand their concerns, and the ability to translate technical requirements into business-understandable terms. Professionals must advocate for solutions that provide the best balance of security, compliance, agility, and cost-effectiveness, ensuring that decisions are data-driven and aligned with the organization's overall strategy and risk appetite. Question 6. When evaluating deployment strategies for a new application within a Cisco ACI environment, which approach best balances rapid deployment with robust security and compliance adherence? Option A. Bypass formal security policy validation for initial deployment to accelerate time to market, with the intention of retrofitting security measures once the application is stable. Option B. Deploy the application immediately to production to meet business timelines, assuming vendor default security settings are sufficient and addressing any security concerns post-deployment. Option C. Deploy the application using the most permissive network policies available to ensure maximum connectivity and performance, deferring detailed security reviews until after the application is fully operational. Option D. Implement the application with a phased rollout, ensuring each stage is validated against predefined security policies and compliance requirements before proceeding to the next, and obtaining all necessary change approvals. The correct answer is D. Implement the application with a phased rollout, ensuring each stage is validated against predefined security policies and compliance requirements before proceeding to the next, and obtaining all necessary change approvals. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud infrastructure deployment, balancing the need for rapid innovation and agility with the imperative to maintain robust security and compliance. The professional is tasked with selecting a deployment strategy for a new application within a Cisco ACI environment. The challenge lies in the inherent tension between the desire for speed, often associated with less restrictive configurations, and the need for thorough validation and adherence to established security policies, which can introduce delays. Professional judgment is required to navigate this trade-off, ensuring that neither security nor operational efficiency is unduly compromised. The correct approach prioritizes a phased rollout and rigorous validation against established security policies and compliance requirements. This represents best professional practice because it aligns with the fundamental principles of secure and compliant cloud operations. By integrating security and compliance checks early in the deployment lifecycle, potential vulnerabilities are identified and mitigated before they can impact the production environment. This proactive stance minimizes the risk of security breaches, data loss, and regulatory penalties, which are critical concerns in any cloud deployment. Adhering to established change management processes and obtaining necessary approvals demonstrates accountability and a commitment to operational integrity. An incorrect approach that bypasses security policy validation before deployment is professionally unacceptable. This failure directly contravenes the principle of least privilege and the requirement for secure configuration management. It introduces significant security risks, potentially exposing sensitive data or critical systems to unauthorized access or manipulation. From a regulatory perspective, such an action could lead to noncompliance with data protection laws and industry-specific regulations, resulting in severe financial penalties and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach that relies solely on vendor default security settings without customization or validation is also flawed. While vendor defaults offer a baseline, they are rarely sufficient for specific organizational security needs or compliance mandates. This approach neglects the responsibility to tailor security controls to the unique threat landscape and regulatory obligations of the organization, thereby creating potential security gaps. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that emphasizes risk assessment, policy adherence, and iterative validation. This framework involves understanding the application's criticality and data sensitivity, identifying relevant security policies and compliance requirements, and then selecting a deployment strategy that systematically addresses these factors. A structured approach, such as a security-focused change advisory board review and a staged deployment with monitoring, ensures that all critical aspects are considered and managed effectively. Question 7. Quality control measures reveal that a critical application deployed within the Cisco ACI fabric is experiencing unexpected connectivity issues, with traffic being intermittently dropped between two application tiers. The operations team suspects a segmentation problem and is considering immediate, broad changes to network security policies. Which of the following represents the most professional and effective approach to resolving this implementation challenge? Option A. Utilize the Cisco APIC to analyze the existing endpoint group, EPC, and contract configurations associated with the affected application tiers to pinpoint the exact policy causing the traffic drops. Option B. Temporarily disable all ACI security policies within the fabric to restore connectivity and investigate the issue later. Option C. Implement a broad firewall rule on the external network perimeter that permits all traffic between the application tiers, overriding any internal ACI policies. Option D. Modify the external firewall rules to allow unrestricted traffic flow between the IP addresses of the affected application tiers, bypassing ACI policy analysis. The correct answer is A. Utilize the Cisco APIC to analyze the existing endpoint group, EPC, and contract configurations associated with the affected application tiers to pinpoint the exact policy causing the traffic drops. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the critical nature of network segmentation in a cloud environment. Misconfiguration can lead to security breaches, compliance violations, and service disruptions. The pressure to quickly resolve the issue without fully understanding the implications of the proposed solution requires careful judgment and adherence to established best practices. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic investigation using the Cisco APIC to analyze the existing EPG and contract configurations. This aligns with best professional practice because it directly addresses the root cause of the segmentation issue within the ACI framework. By examining the EPGs and contracts, the administrator can identify the precise policy that is allowing or denying traffic, ensuring that any remediation is targeted and effective. This methodical approach minimizes the risk of unintended consequences and maintains the integrity of the cloud infrastructure, which is crucial for regulatory compliance and operational stability. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing a broad firewall rule without understanding the specific EPGs and contracts is a regulatory and ethical failure. It bypasses the granular control provided by ACI, potentially opening unintended security holes or violating segmentation policies required by regulations. This approach is a reactive measure that does not address the underlying configuration problem and introduces significant risk. Disabling the ACI security policy entirely is a severe regulatory and ethical failure. Completely negates the purpose of ACI's microsegmentation capabilities, exposing the entire network to unauthorized access and violating numerous security and data privacy regulations. This is a highly irresponsible action that demonstrates a lack of understanding of fundamental cloud security principles. Modifying the external firewall rules without consulting the ACI configuration is also a regulatory and ethical failure. It assumes the problem lies outside the ACI fabric, which may not be the case. This can lead to misdirected troubleshooting efforts, wasted resources, and potentially create new security vulnerabilities by altering perimeter defenses without a clear understanding of internal traffic flows and segmentation requirements. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such issues by first gathering all available information and understanding the scope of the problem. They should then leverage the tools and capabilities of the deployed technology, in this case, Cisco APIC, to diagnose the root cause. Remediation efforts should be targeted, tested in a non-production environment if possible, and documented thoroughly. When in doubt, consulting documentation, vendor support, or senior colleagues is a sign of professional maturity and ensures compliance with established standards and regulations. Question 8. The efficiency study reveals that a proposed network configuration change in the Cisco ACI fabric can significantly reduce latency for critical applications. However, this change deviates from the current security baseline and bypasses a standard security validation step. What is the most professional and secure approach to address this finding? Option A. Implement the change immediately to realize the performance benefits, as the efficiency study indicates a clear advantage. Option B. Conduct a thorough risk assessment and security review of the proposed change, involving the security team before implementation. Option C. Implement the change and then inform the security team about the deviation from the baseline. Option D. Proceed with the change based on the efficiency study's recommendation, assuming the security team will be notified later. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough risk assessment and security review of the proposed change, involving the security team before implementation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud infrastructure management, balancing the need for rapid deployment and agility with the imperative of maintaining robust security and compliance. The efficiency study highlights a potential shortcut that, while seemingly beneficial for speed, could introduce significant risks. The professional challenge lies in evaluating the trade-offs between operational efficiency and adherence to established security policies and potential regulatory requirements. Even if not explicitly stated as U.S. regulations for this exam, the principles of secure design and data integrity are universally applicable and implied in building a compliant cloud. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough risk assessment and a structured change management process. This aligns with best professional practices for cloud security and operations. It prioritizes understanding the implications of deviating from established security controls before implementation. This proactive stance ensures that any proposed changes are evaluated against security policies, potential vulnerability, and the principle of least privilege, thereby upholding the integrity and security posture of the Cisco ACI environment. This approach is professionally sound as it prevents the introduction of unknown risks and ensures that security is not compromised for the sake of expediency. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing the proposed change without a formal risk assessment and security review is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It bypasses established security protocols, potentially exposing the cloud environment to vulnerabilities that could lead to data breaches or service disruptions. This directly contravenes the implicit requirement for secure cloud design and operation, which is fundamental to any responsible IT deployment. Furthermore, it undermines the principle of accountability by not documenting or justifying the deviation from standard security practices. Proceeding with the change based solely on the efficiency study's recommendation without considering the security implications is also professionally unacceptable. The efficiency study, while valuable for identifying performance gains, is not a substitute for a comprehensive security evaluation. This approach demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to integrate security into the operational workflow, which is a critical ethical and professional failing in cloud environments. Failing to involve the security team in the decision-making process is another critical failure. Security is a shared responsibility, and excluding the experts responsible for safeguarding the infrastructure creates blind spots and increases the likelihood of overlooking critical security concerns. This isolation of decision-making is a direct violation of collaborative security best practices and can lead to significant compliance and operational risks. Professional reasoning. Professionals faced with such a situation should adopt a structured decision-making process. First, thoroughly understand the proposed change and its stated benefits. Second, identify all potential risks, including security, compliance, and operational risks. Third, consult relevant policies, standards, and best practices. Fourth, engage all relevant stakeholders, particularly the security team, to gather their input and conduct a formal risk assessment. Fifth, document the entire process, including the rationale for the decision and any mitigation strategies. Finally, follow a formal change management process for approval and implementation. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are informed, defensible, and aligned with the organization's security and operational objectives. Question 9. The control framework reveals that a business unit has independently procured and is planning to deploy a Cisco ACI solution to support a new customer-facing application, bypassing the standard IT governance and security review processes. The business unit cites the need for rapid deployment and perceived cost efficiencies as justification. What is the most professional and compliant course of action for the IT governance and security teams? Option A. Allow the business unit to proceed with the deployment as planned, with the IT governance and security teams performing a retrospective audit to identify and address any issues after the fact. Option B. Immediately approve the deployment to avoid hindering business agility, with the understanding that security and compliance checks will be performed post-implementation. Option C. Reject the business unit's request outright, citing the violation of established IT governance procedures, and instruct them to revert to traditional infrastructure. Option D. Engage with the business unit to understand their requirements and guide them through the established change management, security review, and procurement processes to ensure the ACI deployment aligns with organizational policies and regulatory obligations. The correct answer is D. Engage with the business unit to understand their requirements and guide them through the established change management, security review, and procurement processes to ensure the ACI deployment aligns with organizational policies and regulatory obligations. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud adoption where a business unit, driven by perceived agility and cost savings, bypasses established IT governance and security protocols. The professional challenge lies in balancing the business unit's desire for rapid deployment with the organization's overarching need for compliance, security, and operational stability. Ignoring the established control framework introduces significant risks, including data breaches, non-compliance with industry regulations, e.g., data privacy laws, and potential integration issues with existing IT infrastructure. The pressure to deliver quickly can lead to short-sighted decisions that have long-term negative consequences. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves engaging with the business unit to understand their requirements, and then guiding them through the established change management and procurement processes. This ensures that the proposed ACI solution is evaluated against organizational security policies, compliance requirements, and architectural standards. By involving the security and compliance teams early, potential risks can be identified and mitigated proactively. This approach upholds the principle of least privilege and ensures that all technology deployments align with the organization's risk appetite and regulatory obligations. It fosters collaboration rather than confrontation, leading to a more sustainable and secure cloud environment. This aligns with the general principles of IT governance and risk management, which are implicitly expected within any regulated industry operating under a defined control framework. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to immediately approve the business unit's request without proper due diligence. This bypasses critical security reviews and compliance checks, potentially exposing the organization to significant regulatory penalties and reputational damage if the deployed solution violates data privacy laws or industry-specific regulations. Another incorrect approach is to outright reject the request without exploring alternatives or understanding the business drivers. This can stifle innovation and lead to shadow IT, where business units find unauthorized ways to meet their needs, further increasing risk. Finally, attempting to retroactively apply controls after deployment is inefficient and often ineffective, as security and compliance must be built into the design from the outset. This reactive stance is a failure of proactive risk management and regulatory adherence. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based, collaborative approach. When faced with a request that deviates from established processes, the first step is to understand the business need and the proposed solution. This should be followed by a thorough assessment of the risks, including security, compliance, and operational impacts. Engaging relevant stakeholders, such as security, compliance, legal, and architecture teams, is crucial. The decision-making process should be guided by the organization's established governance policies, risk appetite, and regulatory obligations. If the proposed solution can be made compliant and secure, the process should facilitate its adoption. If not, alternative solutions or modifications should be explored. The ultimate goal is to enable business objectives while maintaining a secure and compliant IT environment. Question 10. The assessment process reveals that a multinational organization is deploying a Cisco cloud with application-centric infrastructure, ASI, to host applications processing sensitive customer data from various geographical regions. The organization is subject to stringent data residency and privacy regulations, such as GDPR, in some of these regions. Which of the following approaches best ensures that the ACI deployment adheres to these regulatory requirements while maintaining operational agility? Option A. Relying solely on external firewalls and intrusion prevention systems to secure the ACI fabric, assuming ACI's default security settings are sufficient for all regulatory mandates. Option B. Utilizing ACI's network virtualization capabilities to isolate all tenant traffic, without considering specific data residency or access control requirements mandated by different regulatory frameworks. Option C. Implementing granular ACI endpoint groups, EPG, and contracts to strictly control data access and flow based on data classification and geographical origin, ensuring sensitive data remains within designated compliant zones. Option D. Deploying the ACI fabric without specific policy configurations for data residency, planning to address compliance concerns through manual audits and ad hoc security patches after the initial deployment. Correct answer is C. Implementing granular ACI endpoint groups (EP) and contracts to strictly control data access and flow based on data classification and geographical origin, ensuring sensitive data remains within designated compliant zones. Explanation: the assessment process reveals a common challenge in cloud deployments, balancing the rapid adoption of new technologies with the imperative of maintaining regulatory compliance. In the context of building a Cisco cloud with application-centric infrastructure, ASI, this involves understanding how ACI's policy-driven model interacts with data privacy regulations. The professional challenge lies in ensuring that the automated provisioning and management capabilities of ACI do not inadvertently create compliance gaps, particularly concerning data residency and access controls, which are critical under regulations like GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation. If the cloud is serving EU citizens or processing their data, the correct approach emphasizes a proactive, policy-driven compliance strategy integrated directly into the ACI fabric's design and operation. This involves leveraging ACI's capabilities to enforce granular access policies and segment traffic based on compliance requirements, ensuring that sensitive data remains within designated geographical boundaries or is protected by appropriate security controls. This aligns with the principle of privacy by design and security by design, which are fundamental to GDPR and similar regulations. By embedding compliance into the infrastructure's automation, organizations can achieve both agility and assurance, demonstrating due diligence and a commitment to protecting personal data. An incorrect approach would be to treat compliance as an afterthought, applying manual checks or external security measures without integrating them into the ACI policy model. This creates a significant regulatory and ethical failure. For instance, failing to configure ACI policies to restrict data access to authorized personnel based on their geographical location or role would violate data residency requirements under GDPR. Similarly, relying solely on perimeter security without granular internal segmentation, which ACI facilitates, leaves the organization vulnerable to breaches and noncompliance with data protection principles. Another failure would be to assume that ACI's inherent security features are sufficient without a thorough assessment of specific regulatory obligations and the configuration of policies to meet those obligations. This demonstrates a lack of understanding of the specific regulatory landscape and a failure to implement appropriate safeguards, leading to potential fines and reputational damage. Professional decision-making process should involve a thorough understanding of applicable regulations, a detailed mapping of data flows and sensitive data types within the cloud environment, and a comprehensive review of ACI's policy capabilities to ensure they can effectively enforce compliance controls. This requires collaboration between cloud architects, security teams, and legal/compliance officers. When designing or modifying the ACI fabric, professionals should ask, does this configuration inherently support or hinder our regulatory obligations? And can ACI's policy model be leveraged to automate and enforce these compliance requirements? This proactive, integrated approach ensures that technological advancements are aligned with legal and ethical responsibilities. Question 11. The evaluation methodology shows that a new Cisco ACI deployment is planned to enhance network agility and automation. Which approach best ensures that this deployment aligns with the organization's existing regulatory compliance obligations and security posture? Option A. Rely on the vendor's standard security recommendations for ACI, without performing an independent assessment of their suitability for the organization's specific regulatory context. Option B. Prioritize the technical benefits of ACI, such as increased automation and simplified management, assuming that existing security measures will adequately cover the new environment. Option C. Defer the detailed compliance and security impact assessment until after the ACI infrastructure has been fully deployed and is operational. Option D. Conduct a thorough impact assessment that maps ACI functionalities to specific regulatory controls and identifies potential security gaps, involving security, compliance, and operations teams throughout the process. Correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough impact assessment that maps ACI functionalities to specific regulatory controls and identifies potential security gaps involving security, compliance, and operations teams throughout the process. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent complexity of assessing the impact of a new cloud infrastructure deployment on existing security postures and compliance requirements. The Cisco ACI framework, while offering significant benefits, introduces new architectural paradigms that necessitate a thorough understanding of potential security implications and how they align with established regulatory frameworks. The challenge lies in moving beyond a superficial understanding of features to a deep analysis of how these features interact with and potentially alter the organization's risk profile and adherence to regulation. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a comprehensive and proactive assessment that integrates technical evaluation with regulatory compliance. By engaging stakeholders from security, compliance, and operations, and by mapping ACI functionalities directly to specific regulatory controls, the organization ensures that the deployment not only meets technical objectives, but also maintains or enhances its compliance standing. This aligns with the principle of security by design and compliance by design, which are fundamental to responsible IT governance. It demonstrates a commitment to due diligence and risk management, ensuring that potential negative impacts are identified and mitigated before they materialize. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the technical benefits of ACI without a corresponding impact assessment on security and compliance would be professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a lack of due diligence, potentially leading to the introduction of new vulnerabilities or non-compliance with regulations. Such an approach risks significant financial penalties, reputational damage, and operational disruptions if compliance gaps are discovered post-deployment. Another incorrect approach that relies on assumptions about existing security controls being sufficient for the ACI environment is also flawed. This overlooks the unique characteristics of ACI, such as its policy-driven nature and potential for centralized control, which can introduce new attack vectors or require adjustments to existing security policies. A third incorrect approach that delays the compliance review until after the ACI deployment is a critical regulatory and ethical failure. This demonstrates a reactive rather than proactive stance, increasing the likelihood of discovering non-compliance issues late in the process, which are far more costly and difficult to rectify. It also violates the spirit of regulatory frameworks that often require ongoing monitoring and adherence. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the specific regulatory landscape applicable to the organization. This should be followed by a detailed mapping of the proposed ACI architecture and its functionalities against these regulatory requirements. A risk-based approach, identifying potential areas of divergence or increased risk, is crucial. Engaging cross-functional teams early and often, and documenting all assessments and mitigation strategies are essential steps in ensuring a successful and compliant deployment. Question 12. Compliance review shows that a new business unit is rapidly deploying microservices on the Cisco ACI fabric without a formal process for network policy validation against established security baselines and regulatory requirements. What is the most effective approach to ensure ongoing compliance and security for these deployments? Option A. Defer all network security and compliance reviews until the microservices are fully developed and ready for production deployment. Option B. Grant all new microservices broad network access by default and rely on application-level security controls to manage data protection and access. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive post-deployment audit of all newly deployed microservices to identify and remediate any security or compliance deviations. Option D. Implement an automated pre-deployment validation pipeline that checks network segmentation policies, EPG configurations, and contract rules against organizational security standards and relevant regulatory mandates before allowing deployment to the production ACI fabric. The correct answer is D. Implement an automated pre-deployment validation pipeline that checks network segmentation policies, EPG configurations, and contract rules against organizational security standards and relevant regulatory mandates before allowing deployment to the production ACI fabric. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud environments where the rapid deployment of applications and services can outpace the formalization of security and compliance policies. The core difficulty lies in balancing the agility demanded by business units with the imperative to maintain a secure and compliant infrastructure, especially when dealing with sensitive data. The pressure to deliver features quickly can lead to shortcuts or a lack of thorough vetting of new deployments, creating potential vulnerabilities and regulatory exposure. Professionals must navigate the tension between innovation and control, ensuring that new cloud resources adhere to established security baselines and regulatory mandates without unduly hindering development velocity. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a proactive and integrated security and compliance review process. This means that before any new application or service is deployed into the production Cisco ACI environment, it undergoes a comprehensive assessment. This assessment should verify that the application's network segmentation policies, enforced by ACI's EPGs and contracts, data handling practices, and access controls align with organizational security policies and relevant regulatory frameworks. Specifically, it ensures that the application's data is appropriately protected through microsegmentation, that only necessary communication paths are permitted, and that audit trails are in place. This approach embodies the principle of security by design and compliance by design, embedding these considerations into the development lifecycle rather than treating them as an afterthought. It aligns with best practices for cloud security and governance, ensuring that the organization maintains a strong security posture and avoids potential regulatory penalties. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to rely solely on post-deployment audits to identify compliance gaps. This is a reactive strategy that assumes security and compliance can be retroactively applied. The regulatory and ethical failure here is the significant risk of data breaches or noncompliance occurring before detection, potentially leading to severe financial penalties, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust. It violates the principle of due diligence in protecting sensitive information. Another incorrect approach is to grant broad network access to all new applications by default, assuming that the application developers will implement necessary security controls within the application itself. This approach fails to leverage the robust network security capabilities of Cisco ACI, such as microsegmentation and granular policy enforcement. Regulatory and ethical failure is the abdication of responsibility for network-level security, creating a larger attack surface and increasing the likelihood of lateral movement by threats. It also fails to meet the regulatory requirement for demonstrating control over data access and flow. A third incorrect approach is to defer security and compliance reviews to the end of the development cycle, only addressing them when the application is nearing production. This often leads to rushed remediation efforts, potential delays in deployment, and the possibility of costly redesigns if significant issues are found late in the process. The regulatory and ethical failure is the inherent risk of deploying potentially insecure or non-compliant systems into a production environment, exposing the organization to undue risk. It demonstrates a lack of commitment to integrating security and compliance throughout the development lifecycle. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based, proactive approach to cloud security and compliance. This involves establishing clear policies and procedures for the deployment of new applications and services, integrating security and compliance checks early in the development lifecycle, and leveraging the capabilities of the underlying infrastructure, like Cisco ACI, to enforce security policies at the network level. A continuous monitoring and auditing strategy should complement these proactive measures. When faced with pressure to deploy quickly, professionals must advocate for the necessary security and compliance reviews, clearly articulating the risks associated with bypassing these critical steps. This requires strong communication skills, an understanding of both technical and business requirements, and a commitment to upholding ethical and regulatory obligations. Question 13. The audit findings indicate that the current risk assessment process for the organization's Cisco ACI deployment is not adequately integrated with the broader enterprise risk management framework, potentially leaving critical vulnerabilities unaddressed. Which of the following approaches best addresses this finding while adhering to established risk management best practices? Option A. Develop a completely new, standalone risk assessment process exclusively for the Cisco ACI environment, managed by the network engineering team. Option B. Conduct informal, ad hoc risk identification sessions with ACI subject matter experts whenever a new feature is deployed. Option C. Enhance the existing enterprise risk management framework to include specific controls and assessment methodologies for Cisco ACI, ensuring its risks are evaluated alongside other IT and business risks. Option D. Rely on the vendor's default security configuration and assume that any risks associated with ACI are covered by their general security statements. The correct answer is C. Enhance the existing enterprise risk management framework to include specific controls and assessment methodologies for Cisco ACI, ensuring its risks are evaluated alongside other IT and business risks. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because the audit findings highlight a potential gap in the organization's risk assessment process for its Cisco ACI deployment. The challenge lies in ensuring that the risk assessment is not only technically sound, but also aligns with the organization's overall security posture and compliance requirements, without introducing undue complexity or operational overhead. Careful judgment is required to select an approach that is both effective in identifying and mitigating risks and practical to implement within the existing framework. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the identified audit finding by integrating the ACI-specific risks into the broader enterprise risk management framework. This ensures that the assessment is comprehensive, considers the interdependencies between ACI and other IT systems, and allows for consistent risk treatment strategies. It aligns with the principle of a unified security and compliance strategy, which is crucial for effective governance and risk mitigation in a cloud environment. This approach fosters a proactive security culture and ensures that the unique risks associated with software-defined networking and cloud orchestration are systematically managed. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on technical vulnerabilities without considering business impact or regulatory implications fails to provide a holistic view of risk. This can lead to misallocation of resources, where minor technical issues are overemphasized, while significant business risks are overlooked. This approach may also violate regulatory requirements that mandate a comprehensive risk assessment that considers all relevant threats and their potential impact on business operations and data. Another incorrect approach that involves creating a completely separate and isolated risk assessment process for ACI, disconnected from the enterprise-wide framework, is professionally unacceptable. This leads to duplicated efforts, inconsistent risk scoring, and a lack of visibility for senior management regarding the overall risk landscape. It can also create compliance gaps, as the organization may not be able to demonstrate a unified approach to risk management as often required by regulatory bodies. This siloed approach undermines the effectiveness of the entire risk management program. A further incorrect approach that relies on ad hoc, informal risk identification without a structured methodology is also professionally unsound. This method is prone to bias, inconsistency, and the omission of critical risks. It fails to provide an auditable trail of the risk assessment process, which is a common regulatory expectation. Such an approach does not allow for the systematic tracking and remediation of identified risks, leaving the organization vulnerable to unforeseen threats. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Understanding the specific context. Thoroughly analyze the audit findings and the implications for the Cisco ACI deployment. 2. Aligning with enterprise strategy. Ensure any proposed risk assessment approach is consistent with the organization's existing risk management framework, security policies, and compliance obligations. 3. Prioritizing impact. Focus on risks that have the greatest potential impact on business objectives, data confidentiality, integrity, and availability. 4. Collaboration. Engage relevant stakeholders, including security teams, network engineers, compliance officers, and business unit representatives, to gather diverse perspectives. 5. Documentation and traceability. Maintain clear documentation of the risk assessment process, identified risks, and mitigation strategies for audit and compliance purposes. 6. Continuous improvement. Establish a process for regular review and updates to the risk assessment to account for changes in the threat landscape and the ACI environment. Question 14. Process analysis reveals that a new business unit is rapidly deploying microservices on the Cisco ACI fabric without a clear understanding of the data residency and access control regulations applicable to the sensitive customer data these services will process. The IT security team is concerned about potential compliance violations and the risk of unauthorized data exposure. What is the most effective approach to ensure these new deployments adhere to regulatory requirements within the ACI environment? Option A. Rely on existing perimeter security firewalls to protect the ACI fabric from external threats, assuming internal traffic is inherently secure. Option B. Assume the default Cisco ACI configuration provides sufficient security and compliance for all application deployments, and no further policy adjustments are necessary. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive manual security audit of all deployed microservices and their network configurations after they have been fully deployed and are in production. Option D. Implement granular security policies and contracts within Cisco ACI that define allowed communication paths and data access controls for the specific EPGs hosting the sensitive data, ensuring compliance is built into the fabric's policy model. The correct answer is D. Implement granular security policies and contracts within Cisco ACI that define allowed communication paths and data access controls for the specific EPGs hosting the sensitive data, ensuring compliance is built into the fabric's policy model. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud environments where the rapid deployment of applications can outpace the establishment of robust security and compliance controls. The core difficulty lies in balancing the agility demanded by business units with the imperative to adhere to regulatory frameworks governing data handling and infrastructure security. Specifically, the challenge is to ensure that new application deployments on the Cisco ACI fabric do not inadvertently create compliance gaps or introduce security vulnerabilities that could lead to regulatory penalties or data breaches. The pressure to deliver quickly can tempt teams to bypass established procedures, making careful judgment and a thorough understanding of the regulatory landscape critical. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves leveraging the policy-driven nature of Cisco ACI to enforce compliance from the outset. This means integrating security and compliance requirements directly into the ACI policy model, specifically within the endpoint groups EPC and bridge domains BD. By defining contracts that dictate allowed communication between EPGs and applying security policies, like microsegmentation or firewall integration, at the EPG level, organizations can ensure that applications are deployed in a compliant manner by default. This proactive, policy-based approach aligns with the principles of security by design and compliance by design, which are fundamental to modern regulatory frameworks. It ensures that as applications are deployed and scaled, the underlying infrastructure automatically enforces the necessary controls, minimizing the risk of human error or oversight. This directly addresses the need to build a secure and compliant cloud foundation, as mandated by regulations that require demonstrable control over data access and network segmentation. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to rely solely on post-deployment manual security audits and remediation. This is a reactive strategy that fails to prevent non-compliant deployments from occurring in the first place. Regulatory frameworks often require proactive measures and demonstrable controls, not just retrospective fixes. This approach introduces significant risk, as vulnerabilities could exist and be exploited for an extended period before detection. It also places a heavy burden on security teams, making it difficult to keep pace with the speed of application deployment. Another incorrect approach is to implement security and compliance controls only at the perimeter of the data center, without granular enforcement within the ACI fabric. Modern regulations emphasize the need for internal segmentation and control over east-west traffic. Relying solely on perimeter security leaves the internal network vulnerable to lateral movement by threats and does not adequately address requirements for isolating sensitive data or applications. This approach fails to leverage the capabilities of ACI for fine-grained policy enforcement within the cloud. A third incorrect approach is to assume that the default ACI configuration is inherently compliant. While ACI provides a powerful framework, its security and compliance posture is entirely dependent on how it is configured and managed. Without explicit policy definition for EPGs, BD, and contracts, the fabric may allow unrestricted communication, creating significant compliance risks. This approach overlooks the critical need for custom policy creation that maps directly to specific regulatory requirements. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing this situation should adopt a risk-based, policy-driven decision-making process. First, thoroughly understand the specific regulatory requirements applicable to the data and applications being deployed. Second, translate these requirements into concrete ACI policies, including EPG definitions, BD configurations, and contract specifications. Third, integrate these policies into the CI/CD pipeline, or deployment workflow, to ensure they are applied automatically during application provisioning. Fourth, establish continuous monitoring and auditing mechanisms to verify ongoing compliance and identify any deviations. This systematic approach ensures that security and compliance are not afterthoughts, but are integral to the cloud infrastructure from its inception. Question 15. Risk assessment procedures indicate that the current deployment and management processes for applications within the Cisco ACI cloud are experiencing increasing latency and occasional service disruptions, impacting end-user experience and potentially leading to compliance issues related to service availability SLAs. Which of the following approaches best addresses these process optimization challenges? Option A. Focus solely on reducing cloud infrastructure costs by right-sizing virtual machines and optimizing storage configurations, assuming that cost efficiency will inherently lead to improved process performance. Option B. Establish a dedicated incident response team to handle all service disruptions as they occur, ensuring rapid troubleshooting and resolution of immediate issues without altering existing deployment or management procedures. Option C. Implement a continuous monitoring and feedback loop, establishing key performance indicators, KPI, for application performance, availability, and resource utilization, and regularly analyzing this data to identify and address bottlenecks and inefficiencies in the deployment and operational workflows. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive audit of all deployed applications and infrastructure components to identify any potential security vulnerabilities, and then prioritize remediation efforts based on the severity of identified risks. The correct answer is C. Implement a continuous monitoring and feedback loop, establishing key performance indicators, KPI, for application performance, availability, and resource utilization, and regularly analyzing this data to identify and address bottlenecks and inefficiencies in the deployment and operational workflows. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud environments where the rapid pace of deployment and the dynamic nature of applications can outstrip the effectiveness of traditional process optimization methods. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need for agility and innovation with the imperative for robust, secure, and compliant operations. Without a structured approach to process optimization, organizations risk introducing inefficiencies, security vulnerabilities, and compliance gaps that can have significant financial and reputational consequences. The challenge is amplified by the distributed and often automated nature of cloud infrastructure, making manual oversight and intervention less feasible. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes a continuous, data-driven feedback loop for process improvement. This aligns with best practices in IT service management (ITSM) and DevOps, which are foundational to building and managing Cisco ACI clouds. By establishing clear metrics for performance, availability, security, and cost, and then regularly reviewing this data against defined objectives, teams can identify bottlenecks and areas for enhancement. This iterative process allows for agile adjustments to workflows, automation scripts, and resource allocation, ensuring that optimization efforts are targeted and effective. This approach is professionally best practice because it fosters a culture of continuous improvement, proactively addresses potential issues before they escalate, and provides a quantifiable basis for demonstrating value and compliance. It directly supports the principles of building a resilient and efficient cloud infrastructure as envisioned by Cisco ACI. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves relying solely on ad hoc troubleshooting and reactive fixes. This is professionally unacceptable because it leads to a perpetual state of firefighting, consuming valuable resources without addressing the root causes of problems. It fosters a culture of inefficiency and can mask underlying systemic issues, increasing the risk of recurring incidents and potential security breaches. From a regulatory perspective, this reactive stance can lead to non-compliance if incidents are not properly documented, analyzed, and remediated according to established policies, which are often implicitly or explicitly required by industry standards and data protection regulations. Another incorrect approach is to implement optimization changes without establishing baseline metrics or a clear understanding of the current process performance. This is professionally unsound, as it is akin to making changes in the dark. Without a baseline, it is impossible to objectively measure the impact of any optimization effort, making it difficult to determine if the changes have been beneficial, detrimental, or have had no effect. This lack of measurable outcomes hinders accountability and makes it challenging to justify resource allocation for optimization initiatives. Ethically, it can lead to wasted effort and resources, and potentially introduce new, unforeseen problems without a mechanism to detect them. A third incorrect approach is to focus optimization efforts exclusively on cost reduction, without considering the impact on performance, security, or user experience. While cost efficiency is important, an unbalanced focus can lead to underprovisioning of resources, inadequate security controls, or degraded application performance. This can result in increased downtime, security incidents, and customer dissatisfaction, ultimately negating any cost savings and potentially leading to greater expenses in the long run. This approach fails to adhere to a holistic view of operational excellence, which is a key tenet of professional IT management and cloud best practices. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured, iterative approach to process optimization in cloud environments. This involves 1. Defining clear objectives and key performance indicators, KPI, aligned with business goals and regulatory requirements. 2. Establishing baseline metrics for current process performance. 3. Implementing changes or automation in a controlled manner, ideally in a test or staging environment. 4. Continuously monitoring performance against established KPIs. 5. Analyzing the data to identify further areas for improvement or to validate the effectiveness of implemented changes. 6. Fostering a culture of collaboration between development, operations, and security teams to ensure that optimization efforts are comprehensive and sustainable. This data-driven, iterative methodology ensures that optimization efforts are effective, compliant, and contribute to the overall resilience and efficiency of the Cisco ACI cloud. Question 16. System analysis indicates that a cloud engineering team is evaluating the integration of a new third-party analytics service into an existing Cisco ACI-based cloud environment. The service promises to significantly enhance data insights, but requires direct access to sensitive customer data stored within the ACI fabric. The team is under pressure to deploy this service rapidly to meet business objectives. Which of the following approaches best aligns with professional best practices and regulatory expectations for such an integration? Option A. Conduct a thorough risk assessment, including a review of the third-party vendor's data handling policies, security controls, and relevant regulatory compliance documentation, and define specific ACI policies to govern data access and security before proceeding with integration. Option B. Implement the integration with minimal security controls, focusing on basic network segmentation, and assume that any compliance gaps will be addressed through future patching or vendor updates. Option C. Proceed with the integration immediately, relying on the third-party vendor's stated compliance certifications and assuming their security practices are adequate for handling the sensitive data. Option D. Prioritize the technical integration and functional testing of the analytics service, deferring any detailed security and compliance reviews until after the service has been successfully deployed and is operational. The correct answer is C. Proceed with the integration immediately, relying on the third-party vendor's stated compliance certifications and assuming their security practices are adequate for handling the sensitive data. Explanation. Scenario analysis. The scenario presents a common challenge in cloud infrastructure deployment, balancing the need for rapid innovation and feature deployment with the imperative to maintain robust security and compliance. The pressure to deliver new services quickly can lead to shortcuts or the adoption of technologies without a thorough understanding of their implications for data privacy and regulatory adherence. In the context of the Cisco Cloud with application-centric infrastructure, a SI framework, this tension is amplified by the complexity of policy-driven automation and the potential for misconfigurations to have widespread impact. Professionals must exercise careful judgment to ensure that business objectives do not override fundamental security and compliance obligations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes a comprehensive risk assessment and validation process before integrating new third-party services into the ACI environment. This aligns with best practices for secure cloud adoption and regulatory compliance. Specifically, it involves a thorough review of the service provider's security posture, data handling practices, and adherence to relevant data protection regulations, e.g., GDPR if applicable to the jurisdiction, or equivalent data privacy laws. Within the ACI framework, this translates to understanding how the new service will interact with existing policies, how data will flow, and what security controls need to be implemented or adapted. This proactive approach ensures that the integration is secure by design, minimizing the risk of data breaches, unauthorized access, or noncompliance with legal and regulatory mandates. It demonstrates a commitment to responsible technology adoption and safeguarding sensitive information. Incorrect approach is analysis. An approach that focuses solely on the technical integration and immediate functional benefits without a corresponding security and compliance review is professionally unacceptable. This overlooks the critical responsibility to protect data and adhere to legal frameworks. Such an approach creates significant regulatory and ethical failures. For instance, if the third-party service handles personal data, failing to assess its compliance with data protection laws could lead to severe penalties, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust. It also violates the principle of due diligence, which requires organizations to take reasonable steps to ensure the security and legality of their operations. Another incorrect approach is to assume that the third-party service is inherently compliant simply because it is a reputable vendor. A vendor reputation is a factor. It does not absolve the deploying organization of its own responsibility to verify compliance and assess risks specific to its own environment and data. This assumption can lead to a false sense of security and expose the organization to unforeseen vulnerabilities and regulatory violations. A third incorrect approach is to defer all compliance responsibility to the third-party vendor without establishing clear contractual obligations and oversight mechanisms. While vendors have their own compliance responsibilities, the organization deploying the service remains accountable for the overall security and compliance of its cloud environment. This abdication of responsibility is a direct violation of regulatory requirements that mandate data protection and risk management. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured decision-making framework that integrates security and compliance considerations from the outset of any cloud integration project. This framework should include 1. Requirement gathering and threat modeling. Understand the business need and identify potential threats and vulnerabilities associated with the proposed integration. 2. Vendor due diligence. Conduct thorough assessments of third-party vendors, focusing on their security certifications, data handling policies, and compliance with relevant regulations. 3. Risk assessment and mitigation. Evaluate the risks posed by the integration and develop strategies to mitigate them, including technical controls and policy adjustments within the ACI framework. 4. Policy and control implementation. Ensure that appropriate security policies and controls are defined and enforced within ACI to govern the interaction with the new service. 5. Continuous monitoring and auditing. Establish mechanisms for ongoing monitoring of the integrated service and regular audits to ensure continued compliance and security. This systematic approach ensures that technical advancements are pursued responsibly, with a strong foundation of security and regulatory adherence. Question 17. Compliance review shows that a critical ACI policy is not being consistently enforced due to a transient software bug. The immediate impact is intermittent connectivity for a small subset of applications. The team has identified a temporary workaround that restores full functionality but does not resolve the underlying bug. A permanent fix is several weeks away. What is the most appropriate course of action to maintain compliance and system integrity? Option A. Ignore the intermittent connectivity issue, assuming it is minor and unlikely to be detected by auditors, and focus solely on the permanent fix. Option B. Revert to the last known stable configuration before the bug appeared, without documenting the workaround or the bug itself, and await the permanent fix. Option C. Apply the temporary workaround to restore functionality, but do not document its limitations or the existence of the underlying bug, as this might raise unnecessary concerns during the audit. Option D. Implement the temporary workaround. thoroughly document its limitations and the plan for the permanent fix, and ensure the audit trail reflects the temporary state. The correct answer is D. Implement the temporary workaround, thoroughly document its limitations and the plan for the permanent fix, and ensure the audit trail reflects the temporary state. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge rooted in the ethical obligation to maintain data integrity and adhere to regulatory compliance within a Cisco ACI environment. The core dilemma lies in balancing the immediate need for operational stability with the long-term implications of potentially misleading or incomplete data presented to auditors. The pressure to resolve an issue quickly can sometimes lead to shortcuts that, while seemingly expedient, can compromise the trustworthiness of the system's operational record. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes transparency and accuracy in all reporting and auditing processes. By documenting the temporary workaround and its limitations, and by ensuring that the permanent fix addresses the root cause, the IT team upholds the integrity of the ACI configuration and operational data. This aligns with the principles of good governance and regulatory adherence, ensuring that any future audits will have access to accurate and complete information, thereby avoiding potential penalties or reputational damage. An incorrect approach that involves simply reverting to a previous, known good configuration without proper documentation or a plan to address the underlying issue is professionally unacceptable. This failure constitutes a breach of professional ethics by obscuring the problem and its temporary resolution, potentially leading to a false sense of security. It also creates a regulatory risk, as auditors may not be aware of the temporary state of the system, leading to misinterpretations of compliance. Another incorrect approach, which is to ignore the discrepancy and hope it goes unnoticed, is a severe ethical and professional failing. This demonstrates a lack of diligence and a disregard for accountability. It directly violates the principle of honest representation of system status and creates a significant risk of non-compliance, as the system is not operating as intended or documented. A third incorrect approach, which is to implement a quick fix that doesn't address the root cause but masks the symptom, is also problematic. While it might restore functionality, it leaves the system vulnerable to future recurrence of the issue and creates technical debt. From a compliance perspective, it means the system is not truly stable or correctly configured, which could be flagged during an audit. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Identify the problem and its immediate impact. 2. Assess the urgency and potential risks of inaction. 3. Explore potential solutions, considering both immediate and long-term implications. 4. Prioritize solutions that maintain data integrity and regulatory compliance. 5. Document all actions taken, including temporary workarounds, their rationale and limitations. 6. Develop and implement a plan to address the root cause. 7. Communicate transparently with relevant stakeholders, including auditors if necessary. Question 18. The risk matrix shows a high likelihood of unauthorized access to sensitive data and a moderate likelihood of service disruption due to misconfiguration when implementing a new network automation solution like Cisco ACI. A project manager is advocating for rapid deployment to realize immediate cost savings and operational efficiencies. What is the most professional and compliant approach to proceed? Option A. Proceed with the rapid deployment of Cisco ACI as planned, prioritizing the immediate realization of cost savings and operational efficiencies, and address any security or disruption issues reactively as they arise. Option B. Delegate the responsibility for addressing the risks identified in the matrix to the security and compliance teams without direct involvement from the project management team in the solution's technical implementation. Option C. Implement Cisco ACI with a focus on automation features only, deferring any security or compliance-related configurations and reviews to a later phase of the project. Option D. Conduct a detailed security and compliance review of the proposed Cisco ACI implementation, focusing on its native controls and the need for any compensating controls to mitigate the identified risks before proceeding with deployment. Correct answer is D. Conduct a detailed security and compliance review of the proposed Cisco ACI implementation, focusing on its native controls and the need for any compensating controls to mitigate the identified risks before proceeding with deployment. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud adoption, where the perceived benefits of a new technology like Cisco ACI for network automation, clash with the established operational procedures and risk tolerance of an organization. The challenge lies in balancing the drive for innovation and efficiency with the imperative to maintain security, compliance, and operational stability. Stakeholders, particularly those responsible for security and compliance, will naturally be more risk-averse, while those focused on agility and cost reduction might push for faster adoption. The risk matrix, by highlighting potential threats, serves as a critical tool for informed decision-making, but its interpretation and the subsequent actions taken are where professional judgment is tested. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough, risk-based evaluation of the proposed Cisco ACI implementation against the identified risks. This means engaging all relevant stakeholders, including security, compliance, and operations teams, to understand their concerns and to collaboratively develop mitigation strategies. The focus should be on understanding the specific controls and assurances that Cisco ACI provides in relation to the identified risks, and then determining if these are sufficient or if additional compensating controls are needed. This aligns with best professional practice by ensuring that technology adoption is not pursued blindly, but is instead a deliberate process that prioritizes the organization's security posture and regulatory obligations. From a regulatory perspective, this approach demonstrates due diligence, a fundamental principle in many compliance frameworks, ensuring that risks are identified, assessed, and managed appropriately. It also fosters trust and buy-in from all parties, which is crucial for successful project implementation. Incorrect approach is analysis. Ignoring the identified risks and proceeding with the implementation based solely on the perceived benefits of automation would be a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach demonstrates a disregard for due diligence and a failure to adequately assess and mitigate potential threats, which could lead to security breaches, data loss, or non-compliance with industry regulations. It also undermines the credibility of the IT department and can lead to significant financial and reputational damage. Implementing the solution without a clear understanding of how it addresses the specific risks outlined in the matrix, or without involving the security and compliance teams in the validation process, is another failure. This can result in a solution that is technically functional but fails to meet critical security or compliance requirements, leaving the organization exposed. It represents a lack of comprehensive risk management and a failure to adhere to established governance processes. Focusing solely on the cost savings and operational efficiency benefits without adequately addressing the security and compliance implications is also professionally unacceptable. While cost and efficiency are important considerations, they cannot come at the expense of security and regulatory adherence. This approach prioritizes short-term gains over long-term stability and risk mitigation, which is a hallmark of poor professional judgment and can lead to severe consequences. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such situations by first ensuring a comprehensive understanding of the risk matrix and the underlying threats. This involves active listening and collaboration with all stakeholders to gather diverse perspectives. The next step is to critically evaluate the proposed solution's capabilities against each identified risk, seeking evidence and technical validation. If gaps exist, the focus should shift to developing and implementing appropriate mitigation strategies, which may include configuration changes, additional security tools, or revised operational procedures. The decision to proceed should be based on a documented risk assessment that clearly articulates the residual risks and the rationale for accepting them, ensuring transparency and accountability throughout the process. Question 19. Strategic planning requires a comprehensive evaluation of how a new Cisco ACI deployment will meet stringent data residency and security mandates within the organization's operating jurisdiction before selecting the most appropriate cloud deployment model. Which of the following strategies best aligns with this principle? Option A. Focus on achieving the lowest possible operational cost for the Cisco ACI implementation and defer detailed compliance reviews until after the system is fully operational. Option B. Prioritize the technical advantages of Cisco ACI for application agility and automation, and address compliance concerns through post-deployment security hardening and audits. Option C. Engage legal and compliance teams to thoroughly map all applicable regulatory requirements and data sovereignty laws to the proposed Cisco ACI deployment model and its chosen cloud environment. Option D. Assume that standard cloud provider security features are sufficient to meet all jurisdictional compliance needs, and proceed with a rapid deployment of Cisco ACI. The correct answer is B. Prioritize the technical advantages of Cisco ACI for application agility and automation, and address compliance concerns through post-deployment security hardening and audits. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud adoption, where an organization must balance the benefits of a new technology with existing operational constraints and regulatory compliance. The professional challenge lies in selecting a cloud strategy that not only leverages the capabilities of Cisco ACI for application deployment and management, but also adheres to the specific data residency and security mandates applicable within the chosen jurisdiction. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the chosen approach does not inadvertently expose sensitive data or violate compliance requirements, which could lead to significant financial penalties and reputational damage. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough understanding of the regulatory landscape before committing to a specific technical implementation. By engaging legal and compliance teams early, the organization ensures that any proposed Cisco ACI deployment aligns with data sovereignty laws, industry-specific regulations, e.g., GDPR if applicable to the jurisdiction. We are strictly adhering to the exam's unspecified but implied jurisdiction and internal security policies. This proactive stance minimizes the risk of non-compliance and allows for the integration of necessary controls within the ACI design from the outset, such as segmentation, encryption, and access controls, thereby building a secure and compliant cloud environment. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on technical capabilities without considering regulatory implications is professionally unacceptable. For instance, deploying ACI in a public cloud region without verifying data residency guarantees would be a significant regulatory failure, potentially violating data sovereignty laws. Similarly, implementing ACI without adequate security controls, such as robust access policies and encryption for sensitive data, would fail to meet general data protection principles and could lead to breaches, constituting an ethical and regulatory failure. Another incorrect approach might involve assuming existing on-premises compliance frameworks are directly transferable to the cloud without re-evaluation, ignoring the unique compliance considerations of cloud environments and the specific capabilities and limitations of ACI in meeting those. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a multidisciplinary team. This includes IT architects, security specialists, legal counsel, and compliance officers. The process should begin with a clear definition of regulatory requirements and data classification. Subsequently, potential cloud architectures and technologies, like Cisco ACI, should be evaluated against these requirements. Proof-of-concept deployments and pilot programs, with a focus on compliance validation, are crucial before full-scale implementation. Continuous monitoring and auditing post-deployment are also essential to maintain compliance in an evolving threat and regulatory landscape. Question 20. Assessment of the most appropriate methodology for evaluating the security and operational risks of a new customer-facing application being deployed onto a Cisco ACI-based cloud infrastructure, considering its integration with existing services and potential data handling requirements. Option A. Focus exclusively on the performance metrics of the application during initial testing, as high performance is assumed to indicate a secure and stable deployment. Option B. Rely on the development team's prior experience with similar applications and general knowledge of cloud security best practices to gauge the risk level. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment that includes threat modeling, vulnerability analysis of the application, and its deployment within the ACI policy model, and a business impact analysis to understand potential consequences of security incidents. Option D. Perform a rapid, automated vulnerability scan of the application's code and its network endpoints, assuming the ACI fabric's inherent security features will address most operational risks. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment that includes threat modeling, vulnerability analysis of the application and its deployment within the ACI policy model, and a business impact analysis to understand potential consequences of security incidents. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud environments, balancing the need for rapid deployment and agility with robust security and compliance requirements. The professional challenge lies in identifying the most effective method for assessing the risk associated with a new application deployment within a Cisco ACI-based cloud, ensuring that the assessment is comprehensive, actionable, and aligned with organizational policies and potential regulatory mandates relevant to cloud infrastructure. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it integrates a systematic, multifaceted risk assessment methodology that considers both technical vulnerabilities and business impact. This approach ensures that potential threats are identified, analyzed, and prioritized based on their likelihood and consequence. By involving relevant stakeholders and leveraging established frameworks, it fosters a shared understanding of risk and facilitates informed decision-making regarding mitigation strategies. This aligns with the principle of due diligence in cybersecurity and cloud governance, aiming to protect sensitive data and maintain service availability. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on technical vulnerability scanning without considering the business context or potential impact fails to provide a holistic view of risk. This can lead to misallocation of resources, overlooking critical business risks, and potentially non-compliance with industry-specific regulations that mandate business impact analysis. Another incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or past experiences without a structured assessment process is inherently subjective and prone to bias. This lacks the rigor required for effective risk management and can result in significant oversight of emerging threats or unique risks associated with the new application. It also fails to provide a defensible audit trail for compliance purposes. A third incorrect approach that prioritizes speed of deployment over thorough risk assessment, assuming that the underlying ACI fabric inherently mitigates all risks, is a dangerous assumption. While ACI provides robust security features, it does not eliminate the need for application-specific risk assessment, which considers factors like data sensitivity, access controls, and potential misconfigurations. This approach can lead to significant security breaches and regulatory penalties. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve 1. Defining the scope of the risk assessment, including the application, its data, and its integration points within the ACI fabric. 2. Identifying potential threats and vulnerabilities relevant to the application and the cloud environment. 3. Analyzing the likelihood and impact of identified risks, considering business objectives and regulatory requirements. 4. Evaluating existing controls and determining the need for additional mitigation strategies. 5. Documenting the findings and recommendations for management review and approval. This structured approach ensures that risk management is proactive, comprehensive, and aligned with organizational goals.